As I write these words, never has the dedication in protecting human rights in occupied Palestine been so appropriate to the people of Palestine in their struggle for fundamental rights. Israel's genocidal assault on the Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank, Israel's hidden war, is in full swing. At least 140,000 Palestinians have been killed or wounded. Civilian infrastructure has been destroyed, including hospitals, schools, and homes. Access to fuel, food, and fresh water has been cut off, and humanitarian aid is either blocked on the nominal border or just trickles in, being entirely dependent on the whims of the occupation state of Israel. Even when aid trucks are allowed into the Gaza Strip, Israeli snipers fire at the Palestinians who clamor to get something to eat, drink, or take for pain relief. There are more than enough war crimes and crimes against humanity in those two sentences to justify protecting human rights in occupied Palestine. The fact that the three authors, Richard Falk, John Dugard, and Michael Lynk, have vast experience between them as UN Special Rapporteurs on human rights in the territory occupied since 1967 makes this book essential reading. With a foreword by current rapporteur Francesca Albanese thrown in for good measure, this book is arguably the definitive read at a time when the International Court of Justice is not only investigating Israel on charges of genocide in a case brought by South Africa last December, but the World Court has also just issued a ruling that Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories and its settlement policy are illegal. It is astonishing that Israel, of course, denies that there is an occupation, insisting instead on calling the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem disputed territories P88, and it is even more astonishing that it has taken the ICJ 57 years to issue its landmark ruling. In protecting human rights in occupied Palestine, Dugard points out that opinions issued by the UN Court are advisory, but laws that they are based on are binding. Moreover, according to Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, Israeli settlements are so clearly illegal. Falk, Dugard, and Lynk all faced obstructions by the Israeli authorities when trying to gain access to the occupied Palestinian territories, as does current post holder Albanese. Nevertheless, their reports to the UN Security Council make it clear that they were able to observe what Israel is doing to the Palestinians living under occupation. Their chapters in this book read like a roll call of war crimes and crimes against humanity, as well as less dramatic but equally disturbing violations of international law and human rights. South African Judge Dugard points out that, "I know apartheid when I see it." Major human rights organizations B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International 1 have all accused Israel of passing the legal threshold for description as an apartheid state. Apartheid is akin to a crime against humanity, and yet the US, the UK, the EU, and other Western allies continue to give Israel unconditional support. Indeed, Lynk notes that in 2022, Michael Ben-Yair, a former Attorney General of Israel, wrote that Israel had become an apartheid regime, a one-state reality with two different peoples living with unequal rights. Lynk adds that international law is not meant to be an umbrella that folds up at the first hint of rain, and draws attention to the remarkable unwillingness of the international community to enforce any of its own laws and resolutions. This, even though all states parties to the Fourth Geneva Convention have the obligation to ensure compliance by Israel with international humanitarian law as embodied in the Convention. We have all been able to watch genocide unfold in real time on social media. The craven mainstream has been largely unable to tear itself away from pro-Israel propaganda. But what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank is really nothing new except in terms of scale. Torture, the killing of civilians, and violations of the provisions of the Convention of the Rights of the Child by the Israel Defense Forces have been widespread for decades. While the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees and aid organizations continue to complain that the amount of humanitarian aid being allowed into Gaza is wholly inadequate, Lynk points out that in 2008, only 41% of Gaza's food import needs are currently being met. According to Falk, in the same year, humanitarian conditions inside the Gaza Strip remain dire. The situation in occupied Palestine and the appalling humanitarian crisis didn't start on the 7th of October 2023, as Richard Falk points out. Israel can defy with impunity its international legal obligations, and has done so for many years. Professor Falk also notes that it is Israel that generally breaks ceasefire rules, to which Hamas responds, and laments the continuing refusal of Israel to acknowledge Hamas as a political actor, based on the label of terrorist organization. All of this has been echoed by commentators since October 2023, and yet, how much more evidence does the world need to act against the occupation state and its increasingly far-right governments in order to restore some degree of credibility to the international laws and conventions that the whole world is expected to abide, to the exception of Israel, and it must be said, the United States?